And I don't think one big final is going to change that.
Okay, I think that for some people, and there were times when I thought it was true for you at those two competitions in the fall, um, you know, sometimes success, especially if it's repeated and it's not a fluke, can lead them to be overconfident. And I remember talking to you a little bit about that.
That was part of what happened at Madison. Like, I mean, at that point, Carter had like a 9 point something average, like high 9, and I had 812. I thought there's no way I'm going to lose. Of course, Carter has made an incredible improvement since then. He got, I still shouldn't have lost to a 9.7 average in finals, but that's what happened. Oh well. And I mean, it just worked out that winning 3x3 didn't win you the Madison competition because it was organized by Will and he likes blind. But yeah, I lost there. I can't exactly explain why.
And then, right, a couple of amazing things happened. There was the second Madison competition later in the fall. I think it was in December at WizCube.
And I think that's the success story that I've been waiting for because, of course, started off the day with 2 OHPVs, which was awesome. And that, I think, at that point, I still didn't get nervous for one-handed. I just got 5 really good solves, and the 5th one was a really nice scramble that I got the good single on.
And the competition, the other competitors that were there, including in OH, because Brian was there.
It was a stacked competition.
It was really tough competition in OH, which, as you said before, is unusual in our area. And, of course, also in 3x3.
I mean, for 3x3, there's me, Carter, Brian, Stanley, Chris Olsen.
David
wasn't at WizCube.
Okay.
But, and then, of course, all those people are really good at one-handed. I mean, like Stanley, like Chris doesn't get great averages anymore, and Stanley isn't quite at the same level as me, Brian, and Carter. But, of course, they're all really good, and if I'm not on the top of my game, I could lose to any one of them. But in finals, that was the most consistent I've ever been with one-handed. I got like high 12 and then 3 low 13s and then just 1 bad solve.
So do you feel like during those 5 solves, you were just kind of in the zone?
I was just in the zone. It all worked out super well. And of course, I think that, like, I've gotten a lot of like mid-low 13 averages recently for one-handed, but that one felt particularly nice.
And what would you say about 3x3 finals at WizCube?
3x3 finals, that was, I can't be happier about how that went. So, first of all, I think that's my only average ever where all of my solves were sub 9.
Interesting.
So,
there were a lot of excellent competitors in that final round. Were you nervous?
I'm always nervous for 3x3, and then really for that, that's where I really focused on completely ignoring what times at least the people that were going to be my competition were getting. Like, I remember Zeke was in the final and I was watching him and supporting him because I knew he wasn't a threat, but I was ignoring Chris, Brian, Carter, and Stanley completely.
Yeah, when you're waiting for your next solve and the other competitors are solving and you look at their times, which is just a natural human thing to do. Yeah. How's my competition doing? You're actually taking your focus away from what you are going to do and focusing on things that you can't control.
Yeah, and if I get like an 8.2, normally I'd be pretty happy with that. But if I just saw Brian get a 7.8 on it, then all of a sudden I'm really angry at my 8.2, and that's just messing up everything.
I think that's been really important, is not, we talked about not doing math in your head earlier. The other one is not looking at other people's times, especially in the finals.
And especially if they're, like, especially if you're in finals, especially if you might win your podium, and especially if they're a threat to you winning or getting a podium.
Now, what I remember about 3x3 finals at WizCube was the sequence of your 5 solves. I don't think you were doing math in your head, but I think you were really dialed into being consistent in a way that was helpful and didn't add extra pressure.
So it was either 8.5 then 8.4 or those reversed. Then I got like a 7.
So 3 good ones in a row.
And then I get 8.9, which isn't at the same level, but I can't complain.
Didn't hurt you.
So, like, even though I'm not doing math, I feel like even in a situation like that, I don't do math, but I know I can relax after 4 solves like that. And I don't, like, you might have different opinions, but I don't think that's super harmful as long as I'm not doing math.
No, I don't think it's harmful at all, but I think it's interesting because you knew how stiff the competition was, and while you were going to have a good average at this point, you also knew that if you nailed the 5th one, you'd have a really good chance of winning.
Yeah, but of course, I also think measuring success or failure in terms of winning or not winning when the competition's really stacked is a recipe for disaster. So I think that thinking I've done really well, let's just do this 5th one, is better than really pushing for let's maybe win this. But it ended up being my best solve of the average, so it all worked out really well there.
Yeah, I was really proud of you for that one. I think I was doing some math, and it looked to me like you were either going to win or be close.
And it's fine if you do math.
But I also think that you knew what was going on, even if you weren't calculating your average as you went, and you somehow calmed your nerves for that 5th solve, and you nailed it. And, you were really happy at the time that you got, but I could tell you weren't nervous. Yeah. And, after the prior 2 competitions in the fall, and especially right after nationals, being able to dial in during a final and put the distractions aside and do your best, that's challenging, and you did it really well that time.
Yeah, and I was very happy with that. Like, that's, aside from like PBs, I think that's the most satisfactory 3x3 average I've had.
So then, let's talk about finals at North Star.
It wasn't finals, it was round 2.
Oh, round 2, sorry.
So round 2, of course, start off with a 10, and that's really an example of when I can push it aside because my next solve is a 640. And looking back on that, I've seen the footage. I think what really sets me apart there is, or at least what makes the difference between like good official solves and bad official solves, is if I can calm myself down enough to be confident in turning quickly. I think that gives me a really big advantage. And I think that's what happened on the 640. And of course, I just did everything we've already gone over, pushing it aside, doing my whole routine, and I get 818, I think. It was either 813 or 818. And then I get another 6.
So at that point, right, the first one was a 10, but you stayed with it, and right, you didn't let that kind of ruin, right, your round, and you get 686. And at that point, right, your major goal that you've been working on
is in reach,
essentially for a year, is to be sub 8. And at that point, you probably can't help doing math in your head or close enough. And if you nail this one, right, you've got sub 8. How did you keep yourself dialed in and not distracted by being nervous?
So, first of all, right as I sat down, I hear shouting from over to my right, and then a horde of little kids run up, because it turns out David +2'd out of like an unbelievable average. So, I think that gave me an excuse to really take as much time as I needed. So I'm just like closing my eyes, taking my deep breaths. Little kid comes up and asks if he can be in one of my videos. I hush him away, and then
I remember before you closed your eyes, you saying to the judge, like giving the judge a heads up, I'm going to take a little extra time.
And I do that a lot, actually, because I often take extra time. So I took, honestly, probably 30 seconds or more there. And then I remember just really thinking, you know what, let's turn confidently, look ahead well, and not do anything too fancy. And it all came together, including the not doing anything too fancy, and I got an 828, which was good enough, and I got my average.
And let's just take a second, not doing anything fancy. So there was a moment during that fifth solve, I think you explained to me afterwards, where you hit a bit of a fork in the road and you could have really tried to do something spectacular, but you chose, a little bit more of a conservative route, right?
There was a chance to use an algorithm, a more advanced algorithm that would have done some fancy stuff, and on any other solve, I absolutely would have done that. But in that moment, for whatever reason, I had the awareness to go, you know what, let's not risk it, because if this gives me a bad case afterwards, then it's over. So I did the more conventional algorithm, got a nice PLL, and got my 828 and got my 775 average.
It's so hard to know when to play it safe and when to take a risk. Mm-hmm. And I think that was an example where you were absolutely aware of what was going on and you chose to play it safe, which might not actually be the best way to put it. And it really paid off. Mm-hmm. If it wouldn't have paid off, if you had gotten a 9 and that would have been the difference between being sub 8 and not, maybe you would have regretted it and said, I should have gone for it. I don't know why I didn't take the risk. But it really worked out.
Yeah, and there was also a mistake on solve 3 where I went back, where I got a case for my OLL where I did my thing, got a case, and then afterwards I went back to the waiting area. Carter just had a 4x4, and I said, can I try something? So I set up my case again, swapped the angle, did it from a different angle, and it would have skipped. And Carter looks at me and just, and I can't be mad about that, because of course I did what I did. I went for it quickly, but there also, I wasn't certain it was going to skip when it happened in the solve, and I could have spent an extra second realizing it doing from the other angle, and then it might have not skipped at all, and then of course I ruined the solve. So right. I think that's another example of playing it safe where it didn't pay off.
Yeah, and again, hindsight, you don't really know what would have happened.
Yeah.
Sometimes it seems like it would have been better if you would have done something else, or it would have been worse. But of course, right, there's no way to know for sure. And if you've calmed your nerves and you're focused, you can make the best choices possible in the heat of the moment. And that's really the goal, I think.
Yeah. So I think that's really where, that's the pinnacle of the story, I think, for me, for dealing with nerves. I haven't had any, really informative experiences since then, so I think that's a good time to transition into the questions. So Yeet Skeet says, I have a problem with shaking in comp even when I'm not particularly nervous. I don't know how to stop this.
Handshaking is a sign of nerves.
Yeah.
And you may not think that you're nervous, but unless your hands shake at other times, like when you're practicing at home, or right, if you're taking a test in school or something like that, then it is nerves, even if you don't think it is and you don't feel nervous. And when your hands are shaking, it's actually a sign that you're either breathing too shallow and too rapidly, or your heart rate is going too fast. And that's where, as you were saying earlier, for yourself, closing your eyes and taking a few deep breaths, right? It's not going to stop the shaking altogether, but it's a way of trying to reset your system.
Yeah, and sometimes when I'm feeling shaky, I'll just hold up my hand a little bit, and then I can see how much I'm shaking, and if it's too much, I'll wait and I'll wait a few more seconds before starting my solve. So like you said, there's no ultimate solution, but you can try to minimize it. I always mess up look ahead during a solve. I'm not sure if that's specifically saying during competitions, or because if it's at home, that's something different altogether. But in competitions, something you can do, like we mentioned mantras at the very beginning, you can sort of set a routine where you, during your preparation, remind yourself to really emphasize look ahead, which I think can be helpful. Like in the past, I've reminded myself to look for my first pair during inspection, and then that's helped me out.
And if you asked me directly at some point this same question, how do I not mess up look ahead? The mantra that I would recommend for you would be one step at a time.
Oh, yeah.
So I know that seems kind of backwards because by definition, looking ahead is trying to stay one step ahead. So that's a good thing and it's a skill. But sometimes, right, your mind will race faster than your hands, and that can mess you up.
Yeah, and of course the opposite could be true, that your hands are going faster than your mind, where if you're just doing panic speed turning, which means that you can't look ahead, then that's not helping you either. So we've got first, Jope Beckman says, when are you good enough to take part in a competition? And of course, once you know how to solve, you're ready. You don't need to impress anyone the first time you're there. Competitions don't happen every day, so when you have the opportunity, you should go.
The first one's always going to be the first one, whether it's in your backyard or you have to drive somewhere or whatever. I guess having watched you for all these years, go to one as soon as you realistically can, because you're going to be nervous and you might as well get that out of the way, basically.
Yeah. So here are some ones I think you're going to like. What are some ideal food and drink choices I could bring to a comp without totally burning myself out?
Okay, I love that question.
This is something he's really good at.
I love that question. So it's a long day. And I'm just going to say, I don't know how many parents ever watch your videos. It's a long day for the parents, too. We love watching you guys solve, but it's a long day and we're not even under any pressure or doing anything. As you know, both at competition and outside of competition, I'm a big believer in making sure you get some protein.
Yeah.
And so when I'm there with you, which is most of the time, we get up early and make sure to get some protein for breakfast, get like a bagel sandwich with some bacon and cheese or something to get you going, not just to fill you up, but also, right, the protein is really good for you. And then as the day goes along, making sure you drink.
Yeah,
right?
You bring me Gatorade, you bring me protein bars, you bring me those Fig Bar things.
Yeah, and those are examples of things that don't just keep you from getting hungry, but they kind of keep your mind and your body fresh.
Yeah, because you might not notice it, but when you're running on empty, you get tired.
Well, and I've never been a cuber, but I've competed in things for myself, mostly endurance events, physical endurance events like long distance biking and adventure racing. And so there, what you eat and drink is really important. And let me just add one other thing, because I see this at almost every competition. Junk food is a bad idea. Mm-hmm. If you forget to eat or you're too nervous to eat and you end up eating potato chips and Doritos and crap like that, by the afternoon, you are not going to feel great. There's no protein in that, and it's not going to help you.
So maybe the goldfish at Heartland wasn't a great idea?
Well, I'll let you say that, not me.
All right, so we've talked about meditative breathing, but then we've got Zachary Miller and Charlie Harrison basically asking, should you sign up for the events that you're good at or everything that you can do?
So that's a great question. What would you say about that?
I'd say, it depends, because if you're there was an experience at North Star where I saw a 10-year-old kid competing in 6x6 and he didn't meet the cutoff or the time limit, and I could tell it kind of ruined his mood. Where if you know that something like that's going to happen, just skip out on it. And if you think that the possibility of missing cutoff is going to ruin your day, then you might as well skip it. But I generally compete in everything that I can. Part of that's that I don't really have to worry about cutoffs anymore. But I'd say everything that you can, you'll either definitely make cutoff in, or missing cutoff won't bother you, I'd say is good to compete in.
Yeah, I think expectations. If doing poorly in an event that you're signing up for fun is going to bother you, it makes no sense.
Yeah, because then you're not having fun.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like, let's see. Preparing too much can leave you burnt out and unmotivated. Preparing too little can leave you unprepared. What do you think is the sweet spot for preparation?
That's a great question. And, in sports and in other kinds of, in performing arts, music, arts, I think that the same question applies. You got to practice a lot, but you can't burn yourself out. And so what is the sweet spot? It's really a great question. I think recovery, the more we understand, especially about sports and other things, and I'll bet it applies to cubing, giving your mind and your body a little bit of recovery time is before you compete is important.
Yeah, and I think that, like, using an analogy, like cramming on a test isn't going to help you. Practicing 16 hours of 4x4 before a competition isn't going to help you a lot. Like, I'm sure I'm taking this quote from somewhere. It's that the week before a competition doesn't make the difference. It's the 3 months before a competition where practice makes a difference. So, like, it's better to have, of course, long-term regular practice rather than cram-in practice. And I think that long-term it's healthier for your mindset as well.
So we've driven to a lot of competitions, and sometimes in the car on the way there, let's say the day before, because we're going to spend the night and then get up early, you'll practice almost the whole time. Other times you'll practice on and off, but not the whole time. What works for you?
So what works for me, when I practice a lot in the car, often it's entertainment because it's a long car ride. Of course, I enjoy just like solving 3x3, and like I'm not of course, an extra hour of practice the day before competition in an event I've practiced hundreds, if not thousands of hours on isn't helping me a lot. But
how do you keep yourself, even if you think you're solving for entertainment or for fun in the car the day before, how do you keep yourself from over practicing and getting burnt out?
I swap events whenever I feel like I need to. So I'll do some 3x3, then some 4x4, then some square one maybe. Just like keep it fresh, make sure you're also enjoying what you're doing. So I think we skipped one, which is, what are your opinions on hand warmers?
Another really good question. We've talked about this.
So I bring a set of hand warmers to every competition I go to. I don't always use it, but if it's a cold venue, they will save your life.
And I've seen other cubers use them. I actually didn't quite realize that until I think I saw Max use them at Nationals a lot last year.
All the time.
And so it's obviously, a universal thing that if your hands are warm, right, you can turn faster and solve faster too. And if it's a cold room, it's kind of obvious. Are there alternatives to hand warmers? Like, have you ever tried, warming your hands another way? And if so, does it help?
I mean, I think hand warmers are the ideal. I've seen people do that, which doesn't seem like it works that well. I've heard that certain muscle groups and things generate a lot of heat, so if you put your hands on your back or something, that can help. But
so one of the things you got to remember is your hands are your extremities. They are the furthest from your heart. Mm-hmm. So especially if it's a cold room, but even if it's not, right, the blood flow to your hands is going to be slower and take longer. That means, first of all, you can't wait until right before you get called to try to warm your hands up. And second of all, right, it takes more time to warm those up than it does, another part of your body that's closer to your heart.
Yeah. So let's see what are the next. So let's just cover this real quick. How judgmental are the people at the competitions? Not that judgmental. I mean, when you go to any competition, at least half the people don't make round two. So don't be worried about that. At every competition, there's people that average 30 seconds, 45 seconds, a minute and a half. And if you're in that group, you're not alone. You don't need to be ashamed or worry about judgment.
I think it's a very supportive community. I can speak for the parents. I think for the most part, the competitors are very supportive. And I would just add one other thing. A lot of first timers or young or new cubers will leave soon after lunch because either they have to travel a ways and they didn't make the next round. Actually think if it's possible, staying and watching some of the more advanced cubers and watching them succeed, both for fun and also because sometimes you can learn something, is a really good idea.
Yeah, and I actually think if you just hang around one specific top cuber and they don't already know you, that might be kind of weird or bother them a little bit. But if you have a few specific really good questions, I'm sure they would be happy to help you. I'd be happy to help you. I mean, if you just come up and ask, how do I get sub 20? I can't really help you that much. But if you have something specific to ask me, I'm happy to help you. I'm just going to kind of rephrase this. What do you think of the idea of having a warm-up cube?
I see almost everybody do that, and I've never really questioned it. It looks to me like they're keeping their hands fresh and their turning speed, but what would you say?
I mean, I'd say for 3x3, I used to do it. I would test out if my execution could handle the most difficult algorithm that I regularly use and solve, because I think that's a lot of people will just do random turns or a few quick algorithms. That's not really helping you. I tested on the most difficult algorithm that I use, but for one-handed, I've stopped doing it because I have no other cubes that feel like my OH cube. So any warm-up I'm getting is training me for something other than what I'm going to be competing on. So I'd say if you have two of the same type of 3x3 and one of them you're competing with, then using the other one to warm up is a good idea. Tom the Cuber says, I'm going to my first comp in late April. When should I start to do comp style practice? I already stack map my solves, and I was also wondering what sort of practice you would class as comp style. So, I'd say whenever, there's no specific time, but whenever you stop learning new things, then you want to completely switch to competition style practice. Because of course those are two separate things. It's learning new things and then refining them. And if you're not learning new things, then you might as well be refining your cubing skills and your competition skills.
And setting up competition-like conditions at home, it's never going to totally replicate what it's actually like at a competition. Mm-hmm. But do you think that's a valuable thing for kids to practice?
I think it's very valuable. I think especially if you have a sibling who cubes or someone that can scramble and judge for you, or you could swap and take turns and scramble and judge for each other. Anything to sort of add to the experience is good practice.
Yeah, I would recommend, film yourself and put a cover over the cube and have a judge there. Mm-hmm. And make sure that you don't go over 15 seconds for inspection. All of those things, which seem like they're obvious, are really good to practice.
Oh yeah, and of course nothing can actually emulate a competition, but you can get pretty close. We talked about shaking, but how to control sweaty hands. I'd say, of course, if it just happens, you can't stop yourself from sweating, but you can bring a towel up to compete with you and dry your hands off before each attempt.
Yeah, I think sweaty hands are like shaking hands. They're a sign of nerves. Mm-hmm. It's just more true for some people than others. That one's particularly inconvenient because it probably messes with your turning speed and your ability to get good times. But, developing a really good routine for when you sit down for a competition solve and take a moment to calm yourself. It's not going to solve sweaty hands any more than it solves shaky hands, but you can put yourself in position to do your best. That's really the point of it.
Yeah, definitely. So it's a lot of these are things we've covered or.
So there's one that I don't see there that before we wrap up I'd be interested in your thoughts on.
Yeah.
How important do you think it is when you're headed into a competition to have specific goals in mind for your performance?
I think that's very important. I think that because you should have some sort of condition that will make you satisfied with what happened. And let's say you have a competition in 3 months and your goal is sub 20, that gives you something to practice towards and it lets you know how your practice is going. Of course, you want to set goals that you don't want to set easy goals and you don't want to set impossible goals. And that knowing what is what just comes with time.
Realistic goals.
Yeah, you want to set realistic but challenging goals. And so every competition on the way, you ask me, what are my goals? And I can tell you for any event, even the ones where I don't care, like Pyraminx, I can say I just want to get a 7 or 8 average.
There's actually an important reason why I ask you that. And that's because if you don't have a really specific goal in mind, then you're not going to achieve any goals. I know that seems obvious because if you don't have a goal, then you'll never know if you reached it or not because it doesn't exist. But I mean more than that. If you don't have a specific goal in mind, then your mind and your hands working together are not going to perform as well as if you do have a specific goal in mind. Now, the flip side of that is you might not reach your goal, especially if it's a challenging goal, even if it's also realistic. But having a specific goal in mind really does improve your performance and increase your chances of getting better. I'm a big believer in that.
And using goals to push yourself, that can be really helpful, and that's how I've done a lot of my improving. So, of course, thank you guys for watching this. I know it's been a very long video. If we didn't get to your question, or if you have more questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. I'll answer them. I'll refer to him when I need to answer your questions. And I hope you enjoyed the video. So, thank you for watching.
Thank you.
See you later.